But once again, you have to consider this in context. You correctly described a 1023. When Senator Grassley first raised this issue, after the whistleblower came to him, the FBI wouldn't even acknowledge there was a 1023. Then the story changed. There was a 1023, but you can't see it.
What happens when Washington refuses to answer simple questions? Tonight, Senator John Kennedy absolutely unloads on Dick Durbin, and what he says exposes exactly why Americans no longer trust the system. This is not about conspiracy theories. This is about accountability, transparency, and equal justice under the law.
I know Senator Graham didn't mean this, but I believe in the system. But the American people right now are skeptical about the system. And I happen to believe that the FBI is the premier law enforcement agency in all of human history. And most of the people there just get up every day and do their job in a bipartisan manner, a nonpartisan manner. But what Senator Graham and Senator Grassley are asking in light of history, in light of the context, is not unreasonable. There's no question that for at least a period of time, there were people in charge of the FBI who acted on their political beliefs. And I'm not talking about former Director Hoover. I'm talking about Mr. Wray's predecessor. The director of the FBI at that time decided that he was going to investigate not one, but both presidential candidates. With respect to one, he decided to proceed, with respect to one of those candidates, he decided to proceed on the basis of information that we now know was manufactured by that candidate's opponent, which we call opposition research. In terms of the second presidential candidate, Secretary Clinton, she was investigated. A reasonable person can debate whether or not she should have been, but the FBI director at that time called not one, but two press conferences to talk about the investigation. And after he concluded it, he then opened it back up. And then he called a second press conference. It might have cost Secretary Clinton the election. Now, the American people have seen all this. And in many cases in government and democracy, it's not the substance, it's the perception. And I don't know in this instance, now that the question has been raised, why FBI Director Wray and our Attorney General can't answer Senator Graham's and Senator Grassley's question and put this to rest.
Senator, I'm just thinking about the timeline. This form, FD 1023, one specific one we're talking about here, came up during the Trump administration. The FBI received this information during the Trump administration. And for whatever it was worth, it was communicated to President Trump's Attorney General, Bill Barr, as well as the FBI. They were in on the conversation as well. Think about the timeline of when it occurred. What was happening in America during that timeline? We were just about to vote on the re-election of President Trump and whether the American people would have him for another term. And now his Attorney General has this information, which some have alleged shows a $5 million bribe to the President of the United States, Joe Biden. Attorney General Barr has this information before the election, and we didn't hear about it? What does that tell you? Was it a cover-up by Barr? For what purpose? This has now become a sinister conspiracy, but I think the timeline argues that it isn't, that there was disclosure and obviously lack of credibility in this FD 1023. Meanwhile, David Weiss is still hot on the case years ago in Delaware as the U.S. Attorney of Hunter Biden. He supposedly, from what I'm told here, was given the same information. Nothing happened. Maybe that means it's not credible. Maybe that means that these reasonable Republican leaders under President Trump decided it was not credible to pursue it. But now it's back again, coincidentally with a week when the former president's appearing before a judge in Florida. It just happens to surface again. I think I'd like to have the question answered that Senator Graham asked, but I think the circumstances suggest that if there was a smoking gun here, some members of the Trump administration would have brought it forward long before now.
Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of wisdom in your words. But once again, you have to consider this in context. You correctly described a 1023. When Senator Grassley first raised this issue, after the whistleblower came to him, the FBI wouldn't even acknowledge there was a 1023. Then the story changed. There was a 1023, but you can't see it. Yeah. Then the story changed. Okay, you can see the 1023, but we're going to heavily redact it. I suppose they didn't know Senator Grassley had seen the original document, but he knew what they redacted, which were the allegations about the tapes. Consider the context. I'm not going to go back through what I just said, but the American people are looking at all of this, and they just want an answer. I agree with you. We don't need a conspiracy. Let's end the conspiracy. But for the life of me, I can't understand why our Attorney General and our FBI Director can't come in front of the Judiciary Committee, in front of God and country, and answer Chuck and Lindsay's question. And if they say, we're investigating this, then we back off. If they say there was nothing to it, perhaps we should ask, okay, can you explain why? What's unreasonable about that, given our history over the past 5 years?
Before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We break down the stories the mainstream media either ignores or spins, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. All right, folks, let's talk about what just went down in the Senate Judiciary Committee, because this was a moment that perfectly captured the frustration millions of Americans are feeling right now. Senator John Kennedy didn't mince words. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't ranting. He was calmly, methodically laying out why people no longer trust the FBI, the DOJ, or the political class in Washington. And Dick Durbin clearly did not like hearing it. Kennedy started by making something very clear. He believes in law enforcement. He believes the FBI, at its core, is filled with professionals who get up every day and do their jobs. That's important, because the left loves to pretend that any criticism of the FBI means you hate law enforcement. That's a lie, and Kennedy shut that down immediately. But then he pivoted to the real issue. History, context, facts. The American people watched the FBI involve itself in presidential elections. We watched one candidate get investigated based on opposition research that turned out to be fabricated. We watched press conferences, reopened cases, and political theater that may very well have changed the course of an election. And after seeing all that, Americans are supposed to just trust the system blindly? Kennedy said no, and he's right. Then came the heart of the meltdown. The FD 1023 form. A whistleblower document alleging a multi-million-dollar bribery scheme involving Joe Biden and his family. According to the timeline, this information didn't appear yesterday. It didn't surface under Republicans in Congress. It existed during the Trump administration. It was known by the FBI. It was known by the Attorney General at the time. And yet nothing happened. No public explanation. No clear answers. Just silence. Kennedy asked the question every American is asking. If this allegation was credible, why wasn't it pursued then? And if it wasn't credible, why won't the FBI and the Attorney General come out and say that clearly, under oath, in front of Congress? This is where Dick Durbin and the Democrats get uncomfortable, because they don't want answers. They want ambiguity. Ambiguity protects power. Kennedy pointed out something else that matters. When Senator Grassley first raised the whistleblower complaint, the FBI denied the document even existed. Then they admitted it existed but said no one could see it. Then they allowed a heavily redacted version to be viewed, conveniently blacking out the most serious allegations. That's not transparency. That's damage control. And this is the lesson Americans are learning in real time. You don't need to believe in some massive conspiracy to recognize that this looks bad. You don't need a smoking gun to demand answers. All people want is the truth, spoken plainly, without politics. Kennedy wasn't asking for prosecutions. He wasn't declaring guilt. He was asking for honesty. Are you investigating or not? Is there evidence or not? If there's nothing there, explain why. That's not radical. That's how a republic is supposed to function. And this is why moments like this matter. Because every time Democrats dodge, deflect, or shut down legitimate questions, they erode trust even further. The American people aren't stupid. They see the double standards. They see how aggressively one side is pursued while the other side is protected. Senator Kennedy said what millions are thinking. Equal justice under the law is not optional. Transparency is not a threat. And no one, not even the president, is above scrutiny. That's not right-wing extremism. That's patriotism.